would you give us some insights as to how having a overlapping designation for an area, how this enhances collaboration and integration, and what you would see as the pros and cons of overlapping designation? If you could just unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, thanks, Kevin. Hi, everyone. Yes, Kevin has already introduced me. So I will start off talking about the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Conservation Area, which is commonly known and referred to as the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Program, or the MDTP, as well as the Maluti-Drakensberg Park World Heritage Site, which is a transboundary World Heritage Site linking Ukahlamba-Drakensberg Park World Heritage Site and Sehlabatebe National Park on the Lesotho side. And of course, the MDTP is the TFCA between South Africa and Lesotho. I will start off with a bit of a history, and to make it the history brief, I will put it across in the form of some chronology of events, and then talk about management issues around particularly the World Heritage Site itself. And then, as Kevin requested, talk to some pros and cons of this kind of overlapping designation. Now, to start off, the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Program, or the TFCA, was initiated formally in 2001 when an MOU was signed between South Africa and Lesotho to establish the TFCA. But a year before that, the Ukahlamba-Drakensberg Park on the South African side was inscribed as a World Heritage Site in the year 2000. Further down in 2007, the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Program launched the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Park, which was linking the Ukahlamba-Drakensberg Park and the neighboring Sehlabatebe National Park on the Lesotho side. This was followed by the development of a joint management plan for the Transfrontier Park, and the establishment of a joint management committee to oversee the implementation of the joint management plan for the Transfrontier Park. Further down in 2013, we saw the inscription of the Transboundary World Heritage Site, which was the extension of the existing Ukahlamba-Drakensberg Park World Heritage Site to include Sehlabatebe National Park on the Lesotho side, to form what we now call the Maluti-Drakensberg Park World Heritage Site, which is a transboundary World Heritage Site for these two state parties of Lesotho and South Africa. Now, the importance of this chronology is that by the time the Transboundary World Heritage Site was inscribed, the governance structures for the Transfrontier Conservation Area were fairly well established. So by 2013, we were some 12 or 13 years down the road with the TFCA. So the governance structures of the TFCA were fairly well established, with the Bilateral Coordination Committee, which for other TFCA is referred to as the Joint Management Board, comprising of the key stakeholders from both sides of the border, the National Coordination Committees, one for South Africa and one for Lesotho. Those would then constitute the Bilateral Coordination Committee. We also had working groups fairly well established: the Biodiversity and Protected Area Working Group, the Tourism Working Group, a Cultural Heritage Working Group, and a Security Working Group, all reporting to the Bilateral Coordination Committee. Now, the established structures of the TFCA took over the responsibility for the establishment and inscription of the World Heritage Site, because the two parks were already a transfrontier park. So the plans to extend the World Heritage Site were a project of the TFCA. So the reporting, the Joint Management Committee of the Transfrontier Park, which is the Transboundary World Heritage Site, the Joint Management Committee was also reporting to the Bilateral Coordination Committee. At the time of the inscription of the World Heritage Site, there were a number of conditions that were set by the World Heritage Committee attached to the inscription. And these included, among others, the recording and documentation of rock art sites within Sehlabatebe National Park, as well as the oral history, recording of the oral history of the cultural heritage of in the park. It also included the promulgation of the Lesotho Biodiversity Management Plan into an act, the slight modification of the buffer zone on the South African side to take care of the portion of the Sehlabatebe National Park, which was on the South African side, but not part of the existing buffer zone of the Ukahlamba Drakensberg Park. So there had to be some minor modifications that the World Heritage Committee requested to be done so that the Sehlabatebe part has a buffer zone on the South African side.
Sorry, Robson, just a note there, 2 more minutes, if you wouldn't mind trying to wrap up in 2 minutes.
Okay. The other condition, of course, was a number of plans and documents that needed to be revised and developed. Obviously, we talked about the Joint Management Plan. There was a cultural heritage management plan that was developed, a fire management plan, tourism strategy, and also a community management of protected areas program, compact strategy that was also developed. And these were facilitated through the working groups of the Maluti Drakensberg Transfrontier Park. The principle obviously being that each park would be responsible for developing its own plans, but when it comes to the joint plans, then the MDTP would then facilitate the development of those joint plans. Just briefly to run through the pros and cons, I think in terms of the pros, the World Heritage Site obviously brings in some oversight from an international arena, so that we don't just monitor ourselves as a TFCA, as the two countries. So we have additional oversight and monitoring from the international community, the World Heritage Committee, but also providing some additional support in terms of ensuring that developments within, particularly the buffer zone, follow due processes. So that we don't on our own as the TFCA start dealing with some developments that are driven by governments, but which may not end up not following due processes. But also the World Heritage Site provides the opportunity for commitment from the two governments, particularly in terms of funding, obviously with the fear of losing the World Heritage status. There's no fear of losing the status of the TFCA, but at least for this small section of the TFCA, there's a fear of losing the status as a World Heritage Site. Just to mention some cons about it is that for the World Heritage Site in particular, it only covers one province in South Africa. The TFCA covers 3 provinces. So there is always a perception that there's a lot more attention provided to the province that has the World Heritage Site. And because of that, we are now looking at the potential and the possibility of extending the World Heritage Site to cover other potential areas within the TFCA. But also that the World Heritage Site, because of its strict requirements, it also can end up being adding a few more restrictive and prohibitive requirements to some potentially desirable investments because of those restrictions from the World Heritage Committee and the world at large. There is actually a couple of examples where some developments have been forced to follow due process because of the World Heritage Site, which might not have been possible if it was just the TFCA alone. Kevin, maybe let me stop there for now.
Good. No, thanks very much, Rebson. And yeah, please hold on to those examples. I think it might be good to bring them to the fore a little bit later on. Seth, I hope that you are ready to speak about your experiences in the Lubombo. And if you can, in a similar way, share with the participants how you have experienced the overlapping designation, and if you've come up, if you've experienced anything with regards to the pros and cons. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin, and greetings to all of us. My apologies for the few minutes that I spent trying to be a technician and sort out some technical glitches here. Yes, it's wonderful to be here and to share some of our experiences. One of the things that I recognize is that Maluti Drakensberg and the Lubombo assist TFCAs probably in the same timeline. The Lubombo started with a protocol that was signed in 2000, similar to Maluti Drakensberg, and the developments, the institutional developments that followed took a bit of time because of the economic discrepancies between the three countries. But the beautiful part of it is that because of those discrepancies, we've had to concentrate on key things that can be quick wins for all the three countries. And that means a lot of lessons and a lot of negotiations have been going on between the countries. The beautiful part is that the Lubombo TFCA is on the northern end of the Maputo-land biodiversity hotspot, which is part of the Maputo-land, Pondoland, Albany, globally recognized. The three countries recognize the biodiversity in the area as being worth conservation. And its conservation helps them to achieve a lot of mileage in the multilateral environmental agreements, which are obligatory in terms of reporting and expanding the conservation area. Therefore, on a conservation point, this was very cohesive in but also culturally, all three countries recognize cultural groups that are common between the three countries, and that means that for the communities, they favor the integration into the TFCA. Now that allows better negotiation for integration and cooperation, because culturally the groups that exist there are more similar. They have intermarriages and they have intercultural activities that already exist in the landscape. This then makes quite a an interesting interaction from a conservation point of view and from a development point of view. The Lubombo as a landscape also has some globally important cultural aspects. For example, the longest occupied cave in the world is placed on the western escarpment of the Lubombo between Swaziland or Eswatini and South Africa, which is the border cave. Scientists estimate that the occupancy has been over 10,000 years. Now, culturally, that's very significant. And there's a lot of research that's going on there. There's been indication that there's artifacts that have been found there that indicate that are changing the world about when mathematics and things like that were started. So it's a globally significant landscape from a conservation area, from a cultural area, from a geological area as well. So now that means a lot of, from a government perspective, a lot of players have an interest in the landscape. And the establishment of a Menon Biosphere Reserve at a cross-country level was seen as an opportunity that could add a layer onto that cooperation, because the TFCA is principally a conservation or Ministry of Environment objective. But the addition of the Menon Biosphere program as one of the aspects in the landscape added the stakeholders, first of all. But also it added a responsibility in developing some of the communities. A lot of the TFCAs in the region, including the Lubombo, have been challenged on the outputs on the socio-economic beneficiation of the communities. And
sorry, Seth, 2 more minutes.
Okay. The addition of the Menon Biosphere program then enhanced that socio-economic development aspect of the TFCA. One of the things we quickly recognized was that it is providing an opportunity to access fresh funding, but also to access a new group of stakeholders that recognize the Biosphere program as a vehicle for socio-economic development for communities. And the Lubombo is 60% owned by communities, and therefore the socio-economic development aspect of the communities is a very important aspect for the success of the TFCA and the Biosphere program. Now, the other aspect, Kevin, that's been giving impetus on this has been, we recognized that we need, instead of doing a piecemeal approach, to develop a landscape approach. Therefore, we've initiated a landscape management plan on the southern side, and we hope that can translate into aspects on the Mozambican side doing the same thing, and the South African side. Because the landscape approach puts together all the stakeholders and house them with a common goal, which was sort of moving in that direction in the TFCA, but was lagging behind. So what the MBR is been able, or the Biosphere Reserve program has done, is create more cohesion for the stakeholders, and to add other aspects that may not necessarily have been very important for the TFCA, like the issue of livestock, for example, especially outside conservation areas. And the Biosphere Reserve Program has added some of those aspects, and therefore the landscape approach is becoming an all-encompassing group. Now, what
Sorry,
it also...
Sorry, Seth, are you nearly at the end of your
yeah.
responses?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
That's fine.
Okay. Take it from there. Let's finish it up.
Yeah, the other aspect that we were adding was the heading for health aspects that would be a partner in the Lubombo, because with 60% land owned by community and them having a lot of livestock in the landscape meant the livestock management aspect is going to be a very important player in expanding the conservation area, at the same time in ensuring that there's actually biodiversity to be conserved, because the presence of livestock has an impact on those conservation areas. Yeah.
Seth, thanks very much for that. There's obviously a huge amount still to talk about, and hopefully we'll be able to draw some of that out in the general discussion in a little while. But now I'm going to hand over to Jess, and Jess can introduce and question the next expert.
Okay, yeah, thanks for those responses already. We've had loads of useful information touching on so many aspects of management of TFCAs and governance, etc. So we could go on for a long time with all of this. So Tonderai, I'm going to offer you the opportunity now to give your thoughts on this. So what experiences do you have in the Bemba Reserve that you'd like to share with the group?
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica, and good afternoon, everyone. Well, to start off with, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but just someone who's living in the landscape, who has been coordinating the Bemba Biosphere Reserve. Let me just start by saying that I think the whole model of a biosphere reserve is not well understood by a lot of people. So biosphere reserves basically is a program under UNESCO Main and Biosphere Program, which was launched mainly to try and to find ways of bringing together the natural and the social sciences, with the end goal of trying to see how can we improve human livelihoods, as well as to safeguard the ecosystems in which these people live in. So the biosphere, mostly known as the VBR, it's quite big, about 30,000 square kilometers, and it covers about 5 local municipalities. And we are very fortunate to have the Greater Limpopo TFCA, as well as the Greater Mapungubwe TFCA as well. So looking at how big it is, and I just wanted to highlight how the working together and how we collaborate and stuff like that, that the key thing about the biosphere is based on a zonation system where we have core areas, buffer areas, and then we have transition. So the core areas in this case, these are usually, there has to be legislated protected areas before UNESCO can declare for to be a biosphere. So in our biosphere, in the VBR, we have the northern part of Kruger, which is our core area. And then we also have the Mapungubwe National Park and World Heritage Site, which are also our core areas. So in terms of the working together, having a World Heritage Site, and you looked at in a World Heritage Site, there's need for a buffer zone. So this is also the same buffer zone that the biosphere, as a core, is one of our core areas. We also use the same buffer zone for the World Heritage Site as our own buffer for the biosphere. This is very important because the area where we're talking about, there is potential for a lot of mining and things like that. So this is where all these key role players can come in, and we've submitted position papers on that together with the World Heritage Site and Mapungubwe as well. So that's where we find that these two, what I can say about the TFCA is that there is room for more collaboration. The biosphere, mainly it's about conserving, but also putting huge emphasis on improving livelihoods. So, for example, some of the programs that we carry out, human-wildlife conflict problems next to the parks, trying also to conscientize the people for them to be aware that conservation is not only about the park, it's also outside. So we work mostly with conservation agencies, sun parks, and also with the people, so that the people outside in the transition zones, they're able to understand the impact of conservation and how do they benefit from the conservation or from the ecosystems that they have. So that's where, Erin, I can say the emphasis of the biosphere, it comes down to the people on the ground improving their livelihoods, but also making sure that they protect their environment. So when you look at the Vembe Biosphere Reserve, we also have our 10-year review in terms of reporting structures. Every other 10 years, we have our 10-year review that we compile, wherein we get information from these other stakeholders, and then we get to incorporate it into the 10-year review that we submit to UNESCO. And then also, in terms of the biosphere working in collaboration or in the TFCAs, at times I feel a lot can be done. Now I'm talking about the pros and cons, that there is still a lot can be done, because for us, it's a biosphere. We have the Greater Limpopo, and then we have the Greater Amapungubwe with the World Heritage Site. I think that a lot can still be done in order to have this cohesion, because what it does, living in these landscapes with these different layers, is that it gives you that that visibility, that when somebody talks about the Mapungubwe World Heritage, obviously it's inside the Vembe Biosphere Reserve. So it also, that's the other advantage that you get, that it gives you that visibility that the biosphere is there. As we all know, the biosphere has got some, the Soutpansberg mountains, they're very, rich in endemic species along that area. So this also tends to give us that visibility, as well as in projects that we do in the landscape. If there is more cohesion and understanding, projects are not repeated, rather we upscale on projects that others are doing. So it's something that also we need to work towards in terms of that repetition of projects. You do a project, you go, then the community will tell you, but last week you were here also. So in order to limit that, there is need for more cohesion. But I can say from my side, there is huge importance, or there is a lot of benefit that we get in existing in this landscape with these different layers. It just goes to show the richness in terms of conservation of biodiversity in the area when you get all these declarations happening in your landscape. So it just goes to show that this biosphere, it has potential, because of all these Greater Limpopo, Greater Crook, all these being in our landscape. I think due to time, I think I will try to stop there for the next questions.
Perfect timing, Tonderai. Thanks for that succinct update. That was really useful. So I guess this, the biosphere reserves are really interesting designations because they have taken into account people, which is obviously so important. I wonder, so from a simplistic point of view, we have kind of like the core area, the buffers area and the transition zone. I'd just like to ask you one question quickly to help me ask the next question properly. But from a point of view of zonation within each of those zones, does that exist? So I understand from the webinar a couple of days ago that Daniel Marnowick had been working in the Kruger to Canyons Biosphere Reserve, and within the transition zone, or within one of the zones, there were different subzones. And is that the case in Vembe Reserve, and is that the case in many biosphere reserves? Tonderai,
yes,
yeah.
I think in terms of zonation, like I said, most of our the national parks in our biosphere, those are our core areas, and provincial nature reserves. Those are also our core areas. And then most cases we have the buffer, but in the buffer you might find that these are also private game farms, private lands.
Okay.
In as well. Yeah. So that's how it works.
Excellent, that's good. So I come from this from a kind of data perspective. So I work at UNEP WCMC on the Protected Planet Initiative, which pulls together protected areas data and data on other effective area-based conservation measures, which are areas that are meeting conservation objectives, but without meeting conservation outcomes, but not necessarily with the objectives. So my next question is kind of related to the data, and it helps to just have that understanding of the different kind of zones within the zones. But from our perspective, we record all different designations in the database. So if there's a nature reserve and there's a World Heritage Site and there's a TFCA covering all of them, and then even within that, there may be other designations, they're all recorded. If we calculate coverage statistics, then we flatten all of these areas down. So multiple designations do not get counted multiple times in terms of coverage. So that's kind of how, from my perspective, so I wanted to understand from the experts that we have today, what the different designations mean in terms of data kind of collection across these different designations, and also like reporting. What's the burden of having these different designations in terms of the data? So maybe if we start back with Rabson. Rabson, would you be able to go first with this? And maybe let's keep these answers to roughly 4 minutes. We have, okay, there we go. Yeah, Rabson, are you able to give an answer in kind of roughly 4 minutes? And then we've got enough time for the rest of the participants to get involved at some point.
Yes, thanks, Jessica.
Excellent.
I think we, like I said, for MDTP, we have the TFCA and then the World Heritage Site within the TFCA, but also the TFCA playing a leading role in terms of reporting. If I can start from there, reporting for the World Heritage Site, which is at 2 levels, because of what I referred to as the conditions that were set for the establishment, for the inscription of the World Heritage Site. The World Heritage Site is expected to produce and submit a state of conservation report, which is required to be submitted once every 2 years for the World Heritage Committee meetings that take place also once every 2 years. And because this is a joint reporting arrangement for the 2 state parties, the TFCA therefore facilitates that reporting process by submitting the state of conservation report, talking to the conditions that were set, but also at each meeting, the World Heritage Committee prescribes what they want to be done within the World Heritage Site, and therefore that has to be reported as well. There is also reporting, what they refer to as periodic review, reporting that's done annually, and this is done online. So all the data for the World Heritage Site is collected and reported through that periodic reporting process online. But also, again, at a TFCA level, we also have reporting and monitoring at a protected area level, as well as the TFCA level through the various assessments, the meta assessments that are carried out. But the data collection is done at the working group level for each of the protected areas, as well as the TFCA wide. Each working group, like I said, biodiversity and protected area working group, tourism and culture, the data is collected at those levels and managed at those levels. But the reporting on the TFCA level is also done to the bilateral coordination committee. So those are the different levels in terms of reporting. The additional one for the TFCA, obviously, being the World Heritage Site that has to be reported to at an international level by the two state parties.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Rabson. So there are lots of different kind of reporting mechanisms depending on the different designations, and also whether you're reporting or whether you're monitoring or reporting the data or doing met assessments. We seem to have lost Seth. I think he's been having internet troubles. So I think let's move on to, oh, have we lost Tondorai now as well? I think we have, yeah. So we've lost two of our three experts. We'll see if they come back. So I guess for now, do any of the participants have any questions that they'd like to ask Kevin, Rabson, or myself? We hope that we'll get Seth and Tondorai back at some point, but for the time being, you've just got us. So please do unmute yourself, give us a wave if you've got your camera on, or write in the chat box, and we can do our best to answer your questions. Okay, we seem to have something in the chat box. So Lisa is saying biosphere reserve establishment is often said to be more bottom up. How can this process support the development of proper consultative zonation in TFCAs? And how is this for World Heritage sites? E.g., maybe Rod de Vletter could answer this as well on behalf of Seth, because Seth is not here. I'm not sure if, Rod, if you're able to answer that question, or have we got anyone?
Yes, I'm here.
Seth is back.
Seth is back. Is he?
Yes.
It looks like Rod is available as well and willing to respond.
Either way, it doesn't matter. I was just a suggestion in case Rusaf really is away, but that was the question that I had in mind.
I think
Thanks, Lisa.
Lisa, I think it's a good question, and if Rod is willing and able to take it up, let's run with that. Rod?
All right, I'm here. Can you see me?
Yeah, we can see you and hear you.
All right, great. I think the participatory planning process is the key for any of this landscape success, and the biosphere does insist on a very strong stakeholder analysis and a participatory process, which may be missing in some of the TFCAs. And my recommendation would be that we do have some kind of a forum or a group to discuss the whole participatory planning in these broad landscapes. Because I think that it's not just the participatory planning that involves communities and private sector and landowners, but it's bringing together the different sectoral stakeholders. You know, we're talking about agriculture and forestry and even health and regional administration, local government. And unless we have a very structured process in place that leads to the implementation of this landscape vision, we're really wasting our time, I think. I see the donors are putting a lot of money into landscapes without actually having critically assessed whether genuine collaboration is taking place. Where are the indicators? How do you determine? And what I've seen is that some of these processes are driven by an agency, could be the conservation agency, and they don't actually sufficiently involve the stakeholders, and they tick the boxes and the donors are happy, and then you end up with nothing. So my feeling is that yes, the biosphere is a bit stricter because you have to indicate exactly what's happened before you get the designation, and you have to have the stakeholders actually have to sign off on their agreement, which is really important. But I think it needs to go much further than that. I think we need to do something around a participatory landscape planning process that covers biospheres, TFCAs, other landscapes that that we all agree on is a sufficient and genuine process. And that's, to me, seems to be too haphazard at the moment. I don't know if that answers the question. But,
thanks for that, Rod. Yeah, no, that's really helpful, and I think just gives an idea of how there needs to be some more of a collaborative effort and stakeholder and great engagement. And I think you make a good point about the funding as well. If we have time, it's something that we'd like to touch on as well. I think for now, we'll just go back. I think we've got Seth back in the room somewhere. So Seth, if you're, yeah, there you are. If you're able and ready, we'll just go back to kind of the question on data and see if you're able to give some of your experiences. So you maybe weren't here when I mentioned it. I think your internet may have cut off at that point. But we're interested in understanding how it works in terms of data collection across the different designations when there's lots of overlapping ones. So is there a way that this could be improved as well based on your experiences?
Yes, I think there's a lot of room for improvement. One aspect is that for now, the Lubombo has different aspects in different parts. For example, the Swaziland part has designated a biosphere reserve, but the Mozambican part has not. The South African part has a World Heritage Site, and the other parts do not have. But the cohesion could be greatly improved, for example, if the biosphere reserve was cross-border, a transboundary biosphere reserve, because the cohesion then would be much bigger. Secondly, at the moment, any data that's being done, collected and then is principally through the conservation areas, which is the core areas, because that's the more organized landscape. But we are also looking at increasing the conservancy part, not just conservation areas, but conservancy, which would include multi-use areas, so that the conservancy improves the coordination aspect and data collection, so that the structures up the governance of the TFCA could then begin to receive data from other players other than just the conservation areas, because that is only one aspect of the data collection that is being done.
Okay, thanks for that, Steph. I think that's really, really useful. I think we've got, we haven't got Tonderai back in the room yet, have we? No.
Yes.
We do.
I'm back.
Oh, there you are. So Tonderai, I don't know whether you have a few minutes to talk about your experiences in terms of data collection across multiple designations. So what's your experience in the Bemba Biosphere Reserve and the different designations that are within that, and do you think it can be improved?
Well, let me start by saying that I think it can be improved. And as a biosphere, the Bemba Biosphere, it's one of the things that we are really working towards, because we see ourselves as like the link, because given that we have these two TFCAs and a lot of private nature reserves and people inside, we're trying to be that link between all these different sectors, trying to bring them together. That's what we hope to do, and that's where currently where the wave of the board is taking that we're in the process of doing our 10-year review and then we had to collect all this data, all this information of conservation, sustainable development projects, rezoning, if there was, which was done. So it involves a lot of stakeholders from local government, national government, collecting all this data. And whilst we were doing that, that's when we also realized that there is room to get even more stakeholders to play a role in terms of sharing of reports. So it's going to start with us. The 10-year review that we have submitted, which will be going to UNESCO, that is one document that we want to share with almost everyone in our landscape, including the TFCAs, so that they also get to get what we know, the data that we have been collecting. And also we get sort of similar issues if TFCAs report in a yearly, then we also get to see what's happening in terms of the data. But it is a challenge because the reporting in terms of data collection, data is collected some for a yearly or in a year to write a report, and some it's 5 years, and then for us it's 10 years. We're gathering that data, but usually we see that if room can be created where we get to share this information, by the time we get to 10 years, the VBA submitting the 10-year review, we are basically submitting all those 1 year for the TFCAs. They're included in our 10-year review. So that the whole, so that's why we're saying the VBR or the biosphere has to play a leading role in getting all this data into one, because we're sharing that landscape. Unfortunately, it will be just for the South African part, the northern part of South Africa, but it will be very, very key data that as biospheres also lies with national and local government. So I think there is room for improvement in that regard by starting to share and collaborating on even the data collection itself, so that we have one voice. If it's conservation from the northern part of South Africa, the Vembe Biosphere Reserve, we know that you read one document at UNESCO, you know that TFCAs also had an input. They put their document there. A World Heritage Site, they also put their document there. So that's where the biosphere is leading towards and engaging other stakeholders so that we can be able to achieve that. But currently it's a bit tricky, but we're always open to engage with other stakeholders.
Yeah, that's really interesting because it also highlights how difficult it is just doing it within one country. So then when these TFCAs are across borders, then having that shared responsibility and who needs to lead on it, how do you do the data sharing, etc. So it's all really complex. We've actually talked for almost an hour now, but we're very happy to stay here to make sure that we answer all the questions that are popping up in the chat box. Obviously, if people have other commitments, then feel free to head off, but we can carry on informally to have a discussion just to make sure that we cover all the topics that we've got in the chat box. Does that sound like an okay idea?
Yes, I think let's do that, Jess. I think that's been a sort of a characteristic of these deep learning sessions, and feel free, Clara and Lisa, to jump in and curtail us if you like. But it's a rich discussion, and I'm sure that there are so many people who are listening and participating who have similar experiences who would like an opportunity to participate. But before we do that, there was a question from Clive Pulteney for Seth. Clive, if you're with us still, would you like to unmute yourself and put your camera on and pose your question?
Good day, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Clive. Go for it.
Okay, Seth and Rod, just in terms of your initiative, using a landscape approach across the TFCA, do you think this might expedite some of the individual initiatives that have never been transfrontier? I mean, the agreements were signed in 1998, the Lubombo Spatial Development Initiative, as well as the TFCA agreement, and nothing in reality is transfrontier at the moment. We try to push the Pongola Water User Association along the Pongola floodplain across into onto the Sutu and to the Maputo rivers. as a whole Lubombo Waterways initiative. And this has just been kicked aside most of the time. There's been no positive response to anything that has been transborder. And which is a real pity, because a lot of the small projects, I think, can only be taken further if there is cooperation throughout that entire TFCA. And I mean, for the most part, I'm talking about the South African part. It's actually been the South African authorities that have been at fault, particularly the Department of Water Affairs. And so the conservation and all the community efforts, I think, should be coordinated through some sort of TFCA entity which actually has some teeth, which is able to do things, as opposed to leaving it to the individual governments to try and get together at some stage, and hopefully something will happen. Otherwise, we're actually going to lose one of the most important biodiversity areas on the East Coast. So with a bit of luck, what I'm really asking is that, do you think your landscape approach would be the type of approach which would be acceptable to the other transfrontier countries and participants in order to make something work? Right across, in fact, even to a tourism association that could be subsumed under that landscape approach. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Clive. From what I can see, we seem to have lost Seth again. So in his absence, if there are any other reps from Eswatini, from the Lubombo Initiative, and possibly Rod, I think Clive did point this at you as well. Are you available, Rod, to respond to Clive?
Yeah, yes, I'm available. Okay, no, I appreciate Clive's question, and I think that I think that collaboration, cross-sectoral collaboration, has been frankly a disaster, and there really just aren't the right incentives to get the sectors to work together. And of course, if this is going to happen at transboundary ecosystem management level, this becomes even more difficult. And I've worked with river basin authorities and TFCAs and biospheres and private sector groups, and I've never really seen it work. And I think the international community is way behind in trying to promote this approach. Things are still done at a sectoral level, and governments are also not motivated. There's all the internal politics, and we keep talking about not working at the silo approach and stuff, but in principle it doesn't happen. The landscape approach is theoretically great, and I see that it may be working. We have to look at other initiatives like Global Landscapes Forum, where this is done, really with forestry and agriculture and with FAO, and see what we can learn from them. But to me, first thing would be to at least consolidate our own landscapes. We're World Heritage Site, Biosphere, and TFCAs under some sort of integrated approach that can then start to leverage working with the other sectors. So I would look at something like a critical landscapes program where we look at biospheres, World Heritage, TFCAs, and then consolidate our capacity and resources, and then really try to push this more collaboration, more participation, develop a proper methodology, indicators, and try to encourage some of our international partners to work together with us on this. And like with the Green Climate Fund, it's possible, maybe with the World Bank, UNDP working from different country offices, maybe working together, but we have to explore this.
So I think we have a point from Joyce in the chat box, which I think is more of a statement, but Joyce, please do let me know if there's anything else in here. So on the data issue, where there are transboundary working groups, the basis of their engagements may be based on a strategy, management plans with specific monitoring frameworks designed to drive monitoring, evaluation, resolution and learning. Each role player in the landscape, which are members of working groups, have a responsibility to feed into the reporting on the activities being implemented, which all sounds very sensible. I see we've got a comment, well, a question from Vince as well, which is a very good question. So with all the different multiple designations and zones, how can we simplify it for communities to understand and comprehend, especially in areas when there's a disconnect between protected areas and people? They're not always happy to hear about another reserve. It's, well, from my point of view, I think I also struggle. There's definitions, there's designations, there's so much terminology around this stuff, it's massively confusing to communicate it, even in the conservation world. So I feel your pain, and I'm not sure I have a good answer for that, but we do need to do better. Perhaps someone else might have some experiences that help Vince understand how best to communicate all of these different designations to the people that are living there.
If there is anybody who is participating who wants to put their hands up and give a quick response to Vince's point, a very important point, and it's absolutely critical that communities are brought on board with an understanding of what the implications are for these additional designations, because certainly that perspective or perception is there, the fear is there, that here comes conservation to take more of our land. So if there is anybody who wants to put their hands up, let's have a look and get an experience from you on that. I don't see any hands going up.
Kevin?
Thandara? Yes, please,
yes,
go for it.
I just wanted to say that I think it's a difficult one to get people to understand. I know it from daily, working with from the biosphere reserve. Even the term reserve is not well accepted, So it's a difficult one, but maybe sometimes what we try to do is to remove all the terminologies of biosphere, of TFCAs. When we go to a community, it's more of if there is a particular problem we're trying to solve with them, we just solve that problem with them. If it's to do with restoration, we do the community restoration. So even if they hear about the biosphere, they can say biosphere does restoration. So to them, we've solved we've got a similar problem that we try to assist or to solve together. In that way, they identify themselves with the biosphere. And then we'll go to a youth network. When you look at using what's on the land, creating opportunities, if you ask a youth in the biosphere, they can say a biosphere is just something they help you get, jobs or, fund for things like that. I think it's trying to get the community to identify with the biosphere, even if they don't know the terminology of zonation, of transition zone, buffer zone, but because those things, it's maybe sometimes it's the audience that you have. If we're working, for example, biosphere research is part of our function as well. So we work with a lot of the researchers. So those ones we can go into detail in terms of the zonation and all those things. But with the communities, they need I think from what we try to do is to offer them something that they come to us as well, to say, this is our common goal. Because if we try to look at heritage, world, TFCAs, there's so many of them. But there is need also to translate most of these into vernacular languages, so that slowly it gets to them slowly, because in most cases it's just done in English. So it's difficult for them to comprehend. But slowly, if we translate it to the local language, where slowly we can explain to them. Yeah, that's what I think.
No, great. Thanks very much for that perspective, Thandara. And I guess that the sense that communities have is that technocrats are coming to impose certain things on them, and there's this sense of resistance to that. And for me, that really does emphasize the need for approaching these processes from a bottom up, and really making sure that the those building blocks, which are represented by the folk on the ground, are really well established and buying into the process, and then one can introduce the broader concepts as that develops. Jess, I think you and I are being tackled by the organizers, and we were asked very nicely to hand back to Clara and Lisa after that input. So Clara and Lisa, from my side, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin and Jessica, for the moderation, and for our experts for their insights based on their experiences in working in TFCAs or in the biosphere reserves in the case of Tonserai. Can I just ask if you have a brief final remarks to make on the topic of the session before we formally close this and the series? Thank you. Jessica or Kevin or any of the experts?
Let's like to suggest that we give the experts the opportunity to have one final say. You happy with that?
Yeah, excellent idea.
Good, Rabson?
Thanks, thanks, Kevin. If you allow me, to Clara, to take a different, a slightly different view of this, and maybe pose a challenge to the organizers and the steering committee, which is to say that we have in this 10th, during this 10th week of the webinars, looked at international designations overlapping with our TFCAs. My challenge is that I think we also need to start looking at our own SADC designations that do overlap with our TFCAs, because I think this will also help us to, get the important relevance politically and otherwise that we need. So we need to align ourselves with these existing SADC designations that overlap, transboundary designations that overlap with our TFCAs, so that we can proactively contribute and influence these developments. The two that I can think of now would be our river basin management arrangements. For example, all your Inkomati river basin management arrangements, your Limpopo River Basin Management Commission. I mean, I'm not giving them their proper names, but we have the Inkomati Tripartite Permanent Technical Committee for the management of Inkomati and Maputo rivers, which involves the Swatini, Mozambique, South Africa, your permanent Okavango Basin Water Commission, involving your Angola, Botswana, Namibia, and all the other river basin commissions, all the way up to the Pangani Basin, your Lake Tanganyika. These are designations that overlap with our TFCAs in a number of cases that I think we need to align ourselves with. In addition to river basin management arrangements, we also have our development corridors that our SADC politicians are driving, which also overlap with a number of our TFCAs, your Maputo Development Corridor, Maseru Devon Corridor, your Palabora Richards Bay, Welvis Bay, Ndola, Lubumbashi, and the rest of the corridors all the way up to your Dar es Salaam corridors. A number of these do overlap with our TFCAs, and I think we need to proactively contribute to these developments. And for development corridors, just to note that there is likely to be developments that may not necessarily be compatible with our own objectives as TFCAs. and proactively getting involved will help us to ensure that appropriate measures are put in place for any of these that may not necessarily be properly aligned to our own development objectives in terms of TFCAs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rapson. I think you made two valid points, and we touched briefly on the RBOs, the River Basin Organizations, in the week in which we discussed the linking with water management, transboundary water management and governance. I don't see Seth in the room. So Tonderai, if you have any final remarks for the session before we go to the moderators and we close. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
That's it. I think just in conclusion, I'd like to say just thanks for also inviting us here, because biosphere reserves are not well understood, and I think from now on, at least more collaboration and working together can also assist, even when it comes to fundraising for projects, huge projects that we're doing in the landscape, or even bringing collaborative funds together in order to achieve a lot of our objectives. And biosphere reserves, I think it's more about also reaching out to the people. So even the issue of the TFCAs, a lot of people don't know about it, but it's a story that we can carry along as a biosphere because we engage with communities on almost on a daily basis. So it's in terms of education and awareness. So it's something that if we are working together, it's something that we can also try to explain to the communities that we're working with on a daily basis. So I'd just like to say more collaboration, especially in terms of monitoring, evaluation, and I think that can be a good way forward.
Thank you very much, Tonderai. Jessica?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thanks for having me in this session. It's been super interesting. I have loads more questions and things that I'd like to talk about, but obviously we're out of time. So I may follow up with the experts afterwards. But it's been really, really great and amazing to have such a good turnout also for all of these sessions over 10 weeks. Just shows how much people are aiming to improve the TFCAs and learn from each other. It's really great to have so much enthusiasm. So I look forward to hearing from some of you again in the future. If you're ever interested about what the Protected Planet Initiative is and whether your biosphere is in there, then get in touch and we can have a look. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Jessica. And Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Clara. Yeah, first off, huge congrats to you and to Lisa and the rest of the team who've put this together over the last 10 weeks and managed it so well. It's been an awesome opportunity, and particularly thank you again for giving us the responsibility of handling the session this afternoon. It's been great, good inputs from the experts, and so sorry that we just run out of time. So much more to say, so much more to ask, and I'd just like to leave everyone with an idea. What came out for me from Tuesday's session was this: the idea of the overlapping designations really making your initiative far more marketable, but from a donor funding perspective. And it's something that's a bit of a soapbox for myself, and that is just a big portion that as much as we appreciate and depend on the funding from the donors, we really need to work towards financial sustainability for these initiatives. And when looking at other designations, the mindset that we need to have is not to make it more marketable to attract more donor funding, but rather to enhance their ability to work towards financial sustainability. Thanks, Clara. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, we had a full week on that. If you remember, you were participating in that, in which we discussed exactly that is, how do we maintain a balance between what we receive and what is the input that we give, and move towards a sustainable system of financing conservation in TFCAs. So once again, thank you everybody for today. I would like to give the word to Tawanda Gotoza, who is representing the SADC TFCA unit. He's a technical advisor to the SADC TFCA unit, for giving just a couple of words as a formal closing session. And then after Tawanda Rapson, who's also a member of the steering committee as the coordinator for the Maluti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Conservation Initiative. Tawanda, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clara, and thank you to everyone who participated in today's session. I think it has been a very long 10 weeks where we learned quite a lot. But from this week's concluding sessions, I think it's very clear that the landscape approach is the way to go. Although it is riddled with a lot of challenges, I think that we've really shared. And I think as a program, it's something that we really need to tackle and make sure that from the lessons that we learned from all these sessions, we are able to, at least going forward, to address some of the issues that really came up so that our program becomes more effective on the ground. I would also want to express my appreciation for the work that was done, that was put into this by especially Clara and Lisa, for all the hard work that they put into this, and for all the people who participated, including passive participation, as well as some of the panelists and facilitators who actually saw through this gruesome process. And I believe it's not the end. Very soon we are going to start another series, but this is the only way to go, especially under these COVID conditions. And I think it's very clear that as going forward, conservation becomes a very key tool that will be used to approach some of the challenges that have been brought in by such zoonotic pandemics like the COVID-19. But it's unavoidable that in future we're going to face similar situations, of which we are going to be better prepared. And this call for a cleaner planet, conservation becomes very key. And collaboration is one issue that is very critical for us to achieve effective conservation at a landscape level. So with those few words, I would say thank you, all of you. And I would like to thank all others that participated in all the webinars. And this is not the end. I would want to indicate that we have learned quite a lot, and a lot of the stuff that we learned we are going to actually apply in our program, which means right now there's a call for us to revisit the TFCA program itself, align it with other global trends, align it with some of the issues that were raised, especially with regards to definition of landscape approach to conservation. And thank you and all the best to all of us. And I'm sure we are linked to several other initiatives that I believe are very key. And we are here to work and collaborate with these initiatives so that at the end of the day, we achieve conservation. At the end of the day, we improve the livelihoods of those people that actually live with these biological resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tawanda. And for launching the idea that we're going to have more sessions like this. It's something that we will look at in the future. But indeed, it is proven possible. And I think that's something that, we were all uncertain about at the very beginning, how successful this was going to be and how people will respond to sort of online interactions. But I think we've learned quite a lot in terms of human resilience to online seminar sessions. Rapson, for you, the closing remarks, and then Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Clara. Yeah, I'm being asked to present a speech, a vote of thanks on behalf of the chairperson of the steering committee, without even touching base with this chairperson himself or herself to look at the speech that I've prepared on behalf of him or her. But all I can say is that I don't have a speech prepared, if that can put your mind at ease a bit. And also to prove that I don't have any speech prepared, I'm not going to do all the protocols of the speech and the speech itself or my presentation is not going to be organized in any way. But I think we will all agree that the past 10 weeks have presented for us some of the most enlightening learning experiences that we could ever think of within the TFCA arena. We never before would we have thought of such an opportunity where we can discuss such a wide variety of issues affecting our TFCAs and how we manage our TFCAs within such a short space of time. We've touched throughout the 10 weeks, which Tawanda says was quite a long time, but which I think at the beginning we thought it was going to be a long time, but I think we now feel it was very short. But we've touched on a number of issues, including legal frameworks, financing mechanisms, issues relating to tourism, the approaches that we can use. But I think in addition to all the learning experiences that we've had throughout this 10-week period, I hope that we've also developed networks that we can use beyond these 10 weeks, networks that we can use to build upon our knowledge and experience to better manage our TFCAs, particularly for the benefit of our key stakeholders, the custodians of the same resources that we are trying to manage, which is our communities. I'm sure we did hear about the origins of these webinars from our organizers, that this was meant to be our usual steering committee meetings, but which, because of the sudden wave of the COVID-19 lockdowns, which just took us all by surprise without much preparatory time, we found ourselves not being able to hold our steering committee meetings physically as we used to do. But I think the important and the clever people within the steering committee then decided that rather than sit back and think that the COVID-19 has meant that we can't have these meetings, this gave birth to these webinars, which I think we can all agree that they have added even more value than we would have done in our physical our physical meetings that we normally have. In this regard, ladies and gentlemen, allow me therefore to, on behalf of the SADC Steering Committee, to take this opportunity then to thank the Steering Committee itself first for giving birth to this idea. I've no doubt that, you know, even themselves, they never expected this kind of success of these webinars when they thought about them. I think we have generated the kind of excitement and learning experiences that even the steering committee members themselves never thought was possible. I'd also like to thank the organizers led by Clara and Lisa. I think we all agree that we have achieved this level of success all because of their impeccable organizing skills and facilitating skills. I think we need to thank you and your team for all the facilitation that you've managed and getting all of us ready and reminding us of these webinars as and when they're about to take place. Definitely we need to extend our gratitude and our appreciation to GIZ and the rest of our donor and funding partners that have helped us to put this all together and work out a program that has managed to get us this kind of success. I hope that we have acquitted ourselves well enough to guarantee ourselves your continued partnership and support into the future. Certainly, thanks to the chairs, the moderators, the presenters, the experts, for all the sessions, for selflessly sharing their experiences and knowledge with all of us, that we really learned a lot out of. And most importantly, and please note, I said most importantly, I didn't say least but not least. Most importantly, thanks to all of you, the participants who have made these webinars possible. Your valuable questions and comments, inputs have undoubtedly added all the invaluable flavor to all the discussions that we've had. We could possibly have tried to have the first one, the second one, and maybe the third, but most certainly no further if we didn't have all your support and participation throughout all these sessions. Lastly but not least, I'm saying lastly but not least this time, I think for a change, we need to say thank you to this COVID-19 pandemic. This pandemic has presented to us an unprecedented and probably once in a lifetime opportunity to extend our coverage to well beyond our region. Had it not been for this new normal that the pandemic has presented to us, we would have never had the opportunity to listen to presentations from as far afield as the UK, the US, and all over the world in just one sitting. If it had not been for this pandemic, there is no way you would have had, all these participants would have had time to participate in most of these webinars. But remember, it has helped us to cut down on all the travel, the accommodation costs that we would have incurred to attend all these webinars. In fact, there is quite a number of us who, if we had to attend these physically, we would not have the money, let alone being invited to most of these, if it was physical arrangements. Now, in thanking all of the steering committee, the organizers, the facilitators, the moderators, the experts, as well as COVID-19, I would like to kindly request all of us to unmute ourselves and have a round of applause. And most importantly, for all these that I've mentioned, but most importantly for ourselves. But please note that after unmuting ourselves and the applause, please do mute yourselves again so that we can go back to Clara. So let us just give ourselves a round of applause. Thank you very much. Back to you, Clara.
Thank you so much, Rebson. On your last point of thank you, COVID, you've actually stolen my thoughts and my words, I must say. I share your thoughts entirely. So without further ado, I would like to thank you all for your participation and pass for the final notes to Lisa, representing the Transponder Use and Protection of Natural Resources Program for GIZ. Thank you, Lisa.
I think I don't have a lot to add. I think Rebson has definitely said it all. However, yeah, for me, it's also the same learning. COVID has brought us, has taken a lot, but it's brought us also a lot with regard to our learning and sharing and building new connections. I would, of course, like to also thank everyone, all the presenters, moderators, especially the participants for being there and also giving us sort of the support that we see, yes, this is something that everyone around the world would like to learn from. But most importantly, I would also like to thank Clara for her hard work on putting this off and convincing us that 10 weeks is indeed a time frame that is required for this. I always refer to the TFCA community as my family. And I definitely have a feeling that the family has grown over the past 10 weeks because we have had so many new people that are part of our network currently. And we never thought that it was possible to have these meetings. And I even never thought it was possible. We've had many network meetings where we thought, shall we now open it up and invite more people? But there's always funding limitations, and it's always difficult to get everybody in the room. So I think this will change our thinking in the future. The steering committee will have to look back and see, okay, how we're going to plan moving forward. And I hope to see all of you at many more online meetings going forward. But with those few remarks, I think I'll hand the word to Clara so that we can finally close.
Yes, I just want to, Rapson, just to put your mind at ease, I did speak to the chair of the steering committee, and because Mr. Cornelio Miguel, who is the director of the TFCA unit for ANAC, has just been appointed the new chair, as some of you may know, it's a rotational basis. He is doing field work in the Limpopo National Park, so he had no connection for this afternoon. So he wished us all the best, and he was very happy when I told him that you were going to close on behalf of the steering committee. Just to put your mind at ease, and there's no relationship broken. So thank you once again, everybody. And if there are new events, which we hope is the case, we will let you know. We have you in the database. And once again, thank you for making this family larger for the past 10 weeks and for the future. Have a wonderful day further. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Clara and team. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Rapson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tendai, and all the press guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, this is the last time. You can definitely unmute yourself and unmute yourself.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye, great people. I'm off now.
Bye, Tawanda. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
All the best.
Bye, Deline. Have a good day.
Bye, Deline.
Bye, Clara.
Have a good day further. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, I did. I did very much. Hi, Lisa.
Hi. How are you?
I'm fine, I think. How are you?
Good. Based in the same country, but we never see each other.
Unbelievable. That's one of the things we shouldn't be thanking COVID for.
No, we definitely shouldn't. We should go for drinks again. Okay. Yeah. Bye, Patience.
Bye. Bye, Patience. Have a good day.
Okay. Ciao.
Ciao.